I'm Matt Wilhelmi. I'm the owner of Strategic Voyages Business Consultants. I'm also the author of Taboo Business Questions, What's Haunting Every Entrepreneur's Growth. And I'm joined again by Mary McKeown-Christie of Maven Marketing Solutions. She's a fractional CMO for mid-cap and enterprise corporations with over 30 years of senior level marketing experience based in Austin, Texas. Mary, thanks again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And so just to do a little recap here, we were talking about this SaaS company that's software as a service. They were doing around 60 million in revenue, and then they realized that they weren't doing some certain things right. And so they got in touch with you. You helped them identify some different issues. And just to do a quick recap here, you brought up a few issues in the last episode. One of them was brand management. They didn't really have this consistent, cohesive brand across different channels. You also mentioned there was a little bit of a lack of marketing leadership, which to me, I look at that from the high level, that's like a lack of a strategy, right? There isn't really one conductor. There's a bunch of people playing instruments, but there's not really anybody making it sound like music. And so that's hopefully something we'll talk about here in a minute. And then the next one was that you said that there was not really like this collaboration with sales. It seemed like they were two totally different siloed companies. And even at times they were in conflict with each other, which that's just not a recipe for success. And we also talked about maybe there was even just like a broad lack of understanding that the managers in place at this company don't really even understand what marketing is supposed to do, which, hopefully there's, some education on your end in helping them get caught up to speed. And then I know that you really wanted to talk about in this episode some cautionary tales. There were some things that maybe they were pushing back on in terms of your suggestions. And I would hope that you kind of allowed them a moment to think about how that would work out and then told them maybe a cautionary tale or two. And so now that we're kind of caught up with our first episode, I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about this infrastructure comment that you made in our break there. What does that mean when you say infrastructure for a company like this?
Well, it's really any company, truly. What's very important is that you understand your audience, and that if you're going to market and trying to educate them about your product or service, that you understand but can track your communications with them, that you can gauge what's happening and how often you've communicated with them and what may have been sent to them in the past, having history, understanding that relationship so that you can move it along the channel from a lead, somebody inquiring and saying, hey, I'm interested in your product or service, making sure a salesperson follows, or a customer service person follows up with that person in a timely manner. What was communicated, how quickly can we convert that lead to an opportunity? How many opportunities do we have in the bucket? And where are they in that sales cycle? Some sales cycles are really short. Some are very long. All of it depends on if they're B2B, if they're B2C. So if you're, what you're selling, product or service wise, and ultimately, how quickly are we able to move the needle on revenue? You can't do that without a CRM. Customer relationship management software. You also have to have other software that can help support automation, meaning, triggering automated marketing communications, social media management, email communications to send out newsletters, etc. All of these require certain softwares. Some of the CRMs out there, like HubSpot as an example, they do both sales and marketing tasks. Some do not. Some try to do it and they do it very poorly, right? But what you find is that you wind up having a pretty strong list of marketing softwares as solution softwares out there, tools for you as a marketer to be able to do your job. And immediately they freak out, the companies freak out. It doesn't really, in this case, they weren't freaking out, they just didn't understand. So I had to sit down and explain why, what's the why. But they just start seeing dollar signs and it starts to make them panic, right? And it's also interesting to me that they're okay with spending a lot of money in the finance department to support finance. But when it comes to what marketing needs to do their job, And by the way, for sales to do their job, and therefore there to be accountability, and that for us to be able to calculate return on investment, there's just baseline functional stuff you need.
So Mary, I want to make sure I heard you right. So when you use the word infrastructure, you're talking about the software, right? The inner workings that support kind of the business operations. And so this $60 million company didn't have a CRM, or it just wasn't working right? Or did they have like a sticky note Excel system? Like what were they doing?
Okay. So to be fair, they did have one, but it was very old, very antiquated, didn't integrate with anything. The sales team hated it. They never configured it properly. They weren't using it properly, right? And so immediately it was identifying, okay, well, is it just a matter, will it actually do the job we need it to do so that we don't have to go spend a ton of money, since you guys are already paying for this thing and you're just not using it properly? Or do we need to scratch it and bring in a new solution? We were able to, for a couple of years, get it reconfigured and getting everyone using it properly, to get to a point where, if the deal I struck was, look, if we can get this thing working the way we need it to and run the reports and the data that we need to, there's a couple workarounds we can deal with, for the marketing communications and the other stuff. But you guys are going to have to pull a trigger at some point. So my deal was, if I grow revenue at a certain percentage every quarter, can you reallocate some of that towards this effort? Because I get it. You want to be fair, but the reality is, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you don't want, you're complaining that you don't know what marketing's doing and you don't know the value of it. Well, I can't show you the value of it without the data, and I need the data from the CRM.
Yeah, so
not an
really
ERP, by the way, not an ERP. An ERP is not going to solve this, right? So,
well, at least they weren't trying to tell you that they were going to use QuickBooks for their CRM, because that's not going to work. I've heard that solution before. It's like, why are we even talking about here? So what happens if a company like this doesn't have a CRM that provides the data? I mean, I could probably guess from like the finance perspective that you're not able to make strategic decisions as well. You're not really able to budget and forecast and know what pipelines look like. But from the inner workings of the company, I would bet there's even more issues. What are some of these problems that come up with companies that don't adequately use a CRM?
Biggest issue is accountability for sales, and being able to calculate why you're spending money on marketing and who cares what happened? I can't show you that data. I can show you some data on, okay, I brought 50,000 people to your website, but if they filled out a form, that form data is supposed to go to the CRM and collect them as a lead, and I count that lead, and then I can track that relationship and show, look, it took 4 phone calls and we converted it to an opportunity worth $50 million, $20 million. And that took 6 months to close because it's a large ticket. Or I've got a smaller ticket that we could close much sooner, depending on the size of the potential client. Without that data and that ability to track from point A to point B, there's zero transparency. There's zero way for marketing and sales to be able to understand where problems may happen in the sales cycle, what collateral may be needed to help move things along, but also accountability. Because if marketing's job is to drive qualified leads, either net new or deeper dive leads with existing customers into the sales funnel, and you can see that happening on the leads and the opportunity side of the database if they're structured properly. You can run weekly reports. You can really create a transparent management environment. Without that, you have no idea if they came to you and said, yeah. So without it, you're basically blind. And then you have to go off of what the sales manager or the sales director might tell you, or what the marketing manager might guesstimate, why would you do that? Do you like burning money? What?
Yeah, so I think like the term that comes to mind is customer life cycle management. Maybe that's the big fancy CMO word that you use in meetings often. But for me, it's the right term, because you want to be able to see how each stage is going in the process, so that you can manage the process instead of just seeing the input and the output and wondering, well, what the heck? Why there's got to be a disconnect somewhere? So wow. So okay, if they don't have a CRM, it sounds like it's pretty clunky to kind of summarize. And I would just say overall, without that CRM and without that data, you are just kind of shooting in the dark. You don't really have an idea of how things are actually going. And in today's day and age, why would you want to do that? Maybe if you were running a company in the 80s, you don't have any other choice. Or if you were relying on phone calls only to see if your marketing is working, maybe you have Suzy Q tally up the calls coming in, but that's just so archaic. You don't have to do business that way anymore. Why would you want to? I would want to know, how much time do they spend on each page of my website? Did they actually download my free ebook or whatever it is on my website I'm giving away? Did they go to my social channels? And I'm sure that if you had that proper software in place, you could probably figure some of that stuff out.
Yeah, that's great examples. Just let me throw one thing out there. It also, for a CEO, it allows them to sleep at night. For the CFO, it allows them to understand where the money's being spent, why, and feel good about signing off on the budget.
Yeah. So again, I wanted to make sure that we touched on as many cautionary tales as you're willing to provide. Being in the business 30 plus years, Mary, you've probably seen some people not take your advice, right? I've had that happen a couple of times, and it's not fun. But I already, by the time the words leave my mouth of advice, I know what could happen if they go down the road of my advice, and I know what could happen if they don't choose to use my advice. And so, we talked about the CRM quite a bit, but I'm curious, with some of these other things that you brought up, like brand management, for example, what happens if a company doesn't have a cohesive brand across their different channels? What happens to that company's image? What are some of the things that, do customers notice it? Do employees get frustrated? What are some of these cautionary tales?
Okay, so thank you for asking. And the answer is both groups are absolutely frustrated and confused. Internally, I can tell you, if you don't have a good message and present yourself well to the world, your employees don't know how to do that either. A good test would be, what is your elevator speech? And they look at you kind of like, what? Like, you've got 10 seconds and you're in an elevator with somebody. Somebody asks you what you do or what the company does. How do you answer? Well, most of them were just coming off, flying off the hip and saying whatever comes to mind and not really thinking strategically about how to position the company to that prospect. If you have a cohesive marketing brand management group, they literally provide you with, here's some examples of what we want you to say. So you hit the right keywords and points so that they spark the right conversation. That's the whole point to marketing. And people kind of, again, take for granted that marketing is in everything. It isn't what you touch, what you hear, what you see, what you feel. It's every part of that. So if they don't make brand management a priority, what happens? Their competitor will squash them like a bug. And why? Because the competitor knows that they know how to position against the weakness. The competitor knows how to educate and elevate thought leadership in the market space so that they are viewed as the leader. The competitor knows that if they are in front of these people in the right places, as an example, spending money on going to trade shows, if you don't do that to stay competitive, and you can do that in several different ways, but if you don't do it, your competitor is going to swoop that market right out from underneath you, right? So I think people, once they step back and realize how deep brand management really goes, and if from there, I always say to them, from your experience, if you go to a car dealership and you've got these cheeseball salespeople that are driving you crazy and they want to keep you there for 5 hours, hold you hostage, and they don't treat you well and they treat you like a number, you have a horrible experience and you're not going back, right? However, if you go to a higher end dealership and they treat you well and, here's a cup of coffee and tell me what your concerns are and let's talk, and it's collaborative, you're at ease, you establish trust, and you can actually get to what you want, how you want it. Or you walk away from the deal, but you still have that good feeling as a prospect and a prospective client. You still have a better feeling in your gut. And word of mouth is very strong. So when you're in niche industries and your brand and the way that you speak to people and what you say to them isn't consistent, people talk, and it can come back to bite you in a huge, huge way, and really affect your bottom line. Really affect your bottom line.
So Mary, I'm looking at my notes here, and we touched on it briefly in our first segment. This concept of not having a marketing leadership, and I think I used the analogy of a conductor in an orchestra, and just kind of having all these different people playing instruments, but not really sounding like music, is maybe the analogy of not having a strategic leadership for their marketing. I would just assume that's how it goes, because I know when I go into a company that doesn't have a finance leader, that's how it is for the finance team. You know, one person has like 17 spreadsheets to measure their function in the accounting world, and then you look over to the next cubicle and there's sticky notes absolutely everywhere because that person doesn't even know how to use Excel. And then you go to somebody else's cubicle, and you know, they've got Excel sheets that are printed out that they're updating with a ruler because they don't know how to use, you know, collaborative Google Sheets or any other sort of sharing system there. And so the reason I bring up these examples is because if you don't have somebody kind of bringing the team together, you're going to lose a lot of progress. You're going to lose a lot of systems of scale. You're going to lose a lot of this cohesion that you're supposed to have, because you do have a lot of people working, but they're not rowing in the same direction, to maybe use a different analogy now. They're not going in the same direction. And actually just the other day, I was talking to another professional who said that it seems like instead of not rowing in the right direction, they're literally taking their oars out and they're just hitting each other in the head with it, because that's how frustrated they were at not having that same accounting system. And so, you know, what are some of the downsides to just having like this massive lack of leadership in the marketing department? Is that similar in your world?
Absolutely. Interestingly, in this case, that was kind of what was happening in marketing. They knew that marketing was important, but they didn't understand how to pull a strategy together. And what was happening was they had, you know, a lot of Indians running around focused on different areas, and nobody was really talking to each other and coordinating. And, you know, with regard to events and trade shows, et cetera, you have to have the right messaging to the right audience, and a lot of that got missed. There was, I would say, bottom line, a ton of inefficiency and waste in the way of you're paying these people. They're frustrated. They can't do their jobs well. They want to do their jobs well. They want leadership. They want somebody to say, you know, okay, what are we doing? Why am I doing this? And oh, by the way, that leader should be fighting to say, hey, we all need to get on this platform, this software platform. This is how we're going to use it so that we're all on the same page. We can run the reports. We can have accountability. We know efficiency. We know what our spend is. Everybody knows where the budget is. The whole 9 yards. There's a ton of different options out there that are super affordable, especially for small businesses. You're not really limited there. But when you do that and you eliminate the confusion, and people do feel like a team and they know what their contribution is to that team. As an example, you know, the creative department of this company was fabulous. They just never had anybody sit down and say, let's create a marketing brand brief. Let's clearly identify who we're targeting, and to the point of where are they? Where do they live? What are their titles? What do they care about? Because you speak to them in a certain way when you understand your audience, right? So when we went through this process and then said, okay, now I'm not the creative one. I just know that I want generally a little bit more sophisticated general concepts. You know, now go make it pretty. I look at a box of rice and a tomato and they whip up a masterpiece. Like I'm just not that person. So they were that person. So it was amazing when they had the right information to run with it, and came back, and the CEO was just floored, like, wow, this is unreal. And then we rolled it out to the sales team, and they were finally really proud of, I work with this company. They're amazing. They're good people. They have an amazing product. Let's talk. What are your questions? It took off like gangbusters. It was really exciting, really exciting.
So Mary, one of the things you kind of touched on is a concept that I wrote about in my book, Taboo Business Questions, What Haunts Every Entrepreneur's Growth. I wrote a chapter on marketing. Now, I'm not professing to be on your level, but it is interesting to see that there's some similarities. So maybe there's a little bit of credence here to what I wrote, but it is essentially that when you're trying to get a good marketing strategy in place, you have to identify who your target market is, all the way down to like as detailed as you can get, because you want to understand exactly what they're thinking about. Where are they at in their decision-making process? Are they likely to get other quotes? Do they need education? Do they, is this something they buy all the time and you're just another vendor? Like that would probably give a different marketing strategy depending on how you answer those questions.
Yes, 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 and yes. Yes, you hit the nail on the head on all of that. That is exactly what you're trying to accomplish, because if you can do that with a strategic mind and understand, okay, now that we understand who they are and where they live and what they care about, now we have to design our communications to speak to them. We have to position our solutions properly so that they understand them. We have to give them opportunities to learn and ask questions in a really safe environment so they don't feel threatened or embarrassed. And all of that takes a huge amount of effort and a very long list of different ways to do it, especially now. But having somebody that can identify these are the gaps we're seeing, and then working collaboratively with sales leadership on, hey, we need to talk and work together regularly. I need to understand what's working, what isn't working. Where do you need more help? Are you identifying other opportunities that we haven't seen? Because I feel like they're like the ground crew. They're on the ground. They're fighting it out. They really have. We don't have the opportunity to be on every call or be in these meetings. And the more information they can bring over to marketing, the more collaborative marketing can be with them to give them the things they need to help.
So Mary, I just want to wrap up this particular episode because we've got another one coming up where we'll talk about the solutions. But just so everybody's on the same page, this was our cautionary tales episode. This is the, oh my gosh, I can't believe they don't have a CRM that's working for them. And, how could you have your logo on your website look totally different than your trade show in Vegas so that people are even more confused kind of episode here. And so just to give our viewers a little bit of a foresight into what's coming up, Mary's going to share with us some solutions for marketing that are not just applicable to this company. They're applicable to lots of companies. She's done this for a long, long time. And so, a lot of her advice can be applied in a lot of different settings. So you're going to want to stay tuned to this next episode where Mary joins us again, and we get to talk about some strategies for success.